Good morning. I'm Ward 1 Councilmember Brianne Nadeau, the Chair of the Committee on Public Works and Operations. Today is Monday, April 22nd, 2024, and I'm calling to order this meeting of the committee over Zoom. The time is 9:08 a.m. The topic of today's hearing is the Mayor's proposed fiscal year 2025 budget for the Office of Contracts and Procurement. The mission of OCP is to obtain quality goods and services through a streamlined procurement process that is transparent and responsive to the needs of government agencies and the public. OCP bears an enormous task. It provides contracting and procurement services to 79 district agencies. It's also tasked with ensuring that all purchases are conducted fairly and impartially. OCP's core services include the DC Supply Schedule, Purchase Card Program, the Surplus Property Disposition and Reutilization Program, as well as the Learning and Certification Programs, which support ongoing development of staff proficiency and procurement service quality. The Mayor's proposed FY25 operating budget for OCP is $30,090,609 and includes 208 full-time equivalents. This represents a 1.5% increase in operating funds and an increase of 2 FTEs. The agency's proposed capital budget for FY25 is $0, a 100% decrease from the FY24 levels of $4,216,301. We will explore more of the agency's budget enhancements and cuts later on in this hearing, including the increase in FTEs, the increase in surplus property funding, and the decrease in capital funding. Most notably, I want to ensure that agency funding is being used successfully to achieve our legislative and budgetary goals and not lapsing or being reabsorbed. It's crucial that we hold our agencies accountable. I look forward to hearing from our public and government witnesses today on OCP. Some logistical reminders for those joining us. In addition to being on Zoom, the hearing is being live broadcast at brianneknadeau.com/live. Witnesses testifying on behalf of an organization will have 5 minutes to provide oral testimony, and all other witnesses will have 3 minutes. In order to ensure we hear from all members of the public, I ask that all witnesses stick to their allotted time. All witnesses participating in this hearing via Zoom are currently listed as attendees. When it's your turn to join a panel, I'll call your name. Please accept the invitation to be promoted, and we will promote you and allow you to unmute yourself and activate your camera. There is a clock keeping time. When your time is up, I kindly ask you to conclude your remarks so we can ensure that everyone has a chance to be heard. For any technical difficulties, send a message to any panelist labeled as committee staff and they will follow up. Okay, so we will now turn to our first and only panel of witnesses for the Office of Contracting and Procurement. Sydney Pryor, the Sumner M. Redstone Global Center for Prevention and Wellness at the George Washington University Milken School of Public Health. Catherine Plume, the Sierra Club DC Chapter. Joanna Blotner, Director of Government Affairs for DC Action, and Jeremy Brzezowski, founder of Agricity. Okay, we'll proceed with Sydney Pryor.
Can you hear me? Okay, great. Good morning, Chairperson Nadeau, members and staff of the committee. I am Sydney Pryor, a fellow at the Redstone Center at the GW School of Public Health. The Redstone Center works to advance evidence-based policy solutions to address the interlinked public health threats of chronic disease and climate change. I am here on behalf of our policy director, who could not attend at this time. We believe that procurement plays a key but underappreciated role in the district's goals for sustainability and health. The district spends billions of dollars each year on procurement, $5 billion managed by the Office of Contracting and Procurement alone, and much of the work of the city is done through contracts and contractors. Because of this, our strategies for sustainability and health must consider how we procure goods and services. For this reason, we urge OCP to fully implement the Environmentally Preferable Products and Services, or EPS program, and this committee to ensure the agency has the resources it needs to do so. Over 10 years ago, the DC Council passed the Procurement Practices Reform Act of 2010, which requires that the district purchase environmentally preferable products and services, known as EPS, to the maximum extent practicable. Under the law, an EPS is defined as a good or service that is less harmful to human health and the environment when compared with competing goods or services. Some basic examples of EPS are Energy Star appliances and paper products containing post-consumer recycled content. Plainly, sustainable purchasing is crucial for planetary health, but it is also a tool to improve the health of district residents. For example, DOEE recently received an EPA grant to implement a green cleaning program to encourage cleaning service providers to use safer and more sustainable products. This program will reduce harmful chemical exposures and improve indoor air quality with the goal of protecting the health and well-being of district residents, particularly children, the elderly, and individuals with respiratory conditions. After the PPRA was passed, OCP began to take steps to implement EPS and issued policies and sustainability specifications. But after key staff left the agency, OCP essentially abandoned this program. By FY21, according to OCP's Sustainable Purchasing Report, the district's total spending on EPS was just 0.34% of the total spend for that year, 1/3 of 1%. In 2021, the council passed legislation intended to bring the EPS program back to life. Among other requirements, the legislation requires contracts over $100,000 to include an environmental certification from DOEE demonstrating either that the procurement includes EPS to the maximum extent practicable or that the EPS requirement is waived due to cost, availability, or other grounds. It also requires that OCP incorporate EPS into training for procurement personnel. Once this new law was passed and funded, DOEE hired 2 FTEs and began to set up the new EPS certification requirement. But OCP has continued to neglect the program. Despite receiving over $800,000 in new funding for sustainable purchasing since FY22, it has continued to dedicate just a fraction of an FTE to EPS and has hired no additional staff. At the oversight hearing in February, OCP indicated that it planned to hire an FTE to work on sustainable purchasing, but we have heard that given budget cuts, this is no longer planned. We asked the committee to clarify this with the agency today. When properly implemented, EPS will affect contracting across the entire government and will require significant training, coordination, and tracking by OCP. To ensure those responsibilities are properly executed, we asked the committee to allocate funding for 2 FTEs at OCP to do this work. In addition, we asked that the committee include a BSA subtitle creating a designated Office of Sustainable Purchasing at OCP where these FTEs would sit. We seek such an office for 2 reasons. First, at the oversight hearing, Chief Procurement Officer Hateman herself said that EPS fell apart when the program's champion left OCP and no one filled in their shoes. This indicates that a dedicated office is needed to ensure that the program is sustained even when staff comes and goes. Second, as discussed at previous hearings, while council has already allocated over $800,000 for sustainable purchasing at OCP, none of this funding has been used to implement EPS. And in fact, OCP has never been able to provide the committee with an accounting of the funds. A designated office will ensure that funding is used as appropriated and can easily be tracked over time. This office would be responsible for OCP's implementation of all sustainable procurement programs, including EPS and the Green Food Purchasing Program. Its responsibilities would include the many action items of OCP identified during oversight, including reviewing updated EPS templates, categories, and specifications, overseeing development and implementation of new mandatory EPS trainings, preparing the annual sustainable purchasing reports, working with the past team to incorporate EPS into the system, and coordinating with DOEE to implement the new requirements. The EPS program has floundered for nearly 15 years. Without OCP's full support and participation, the program will never succeed. So we urge the committee to ensure that OCP has sufficient funding to implement EPS so that we can meet our sustainability goals and our duty to protect the health and wellness of district residents. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Next, we'll hear from Catherine Plume.
Hi, I'm just trying to get my, there we go. Hi. Chairperson Nadeau, thank you for the opportunity to submit testimony to the Public Works and Operation Committee Office of Contracting and Procurement Budget Oversight hearing. I'm Catherine Plume, and I'm testifying on behalf of the Sierra Club DC chapter. I'm a member of the executive committee. The Sierra Club is America's largest and most influential grassroots environmental organization with millions of members and supporters. The DC chapter has approximately 3,000 dues-paying members in the district and thousands of supporters. I'm here to raise two issues today. First of all, we urge the Office of Procurement to make a timely award following the Contract Appeals Board decision to a contractor with the necessary skills to run the compost drop-off program at farmers markets around DC. We haven't been able to find out if this particular case has been resolved, but regardless, contract awards should not be based on the lowest bid without regard to the requisite experience called for in the RFP, as has been the practice within the Department of Public Works for far too long. This practice has resulted in substandard work and a waste of DC taxpayer funds. Secondly, I'm here to raise awareness that despite the district's solid waste laws, to the contrary, there are no recycling services provided to public housing residents. This means that 20,000 district residents living in 800 DC's 8,000 public housing units have no access to recycling. While the Sierra Club is known for its environmental activism, we're also concerned about equity, justice, and access to services. After considerable research, we found that contracts for trash collection and recycling in public housing are awarded by the DC Housing Authority, Stabilization and Reform Board, not the Office of Contracting and Procurement. While it would seem much more efficient to put all trash and recycling collection under one DC agency, we realize that this is a battle for another day. For now, we simply want to ensure that you and this committee are both aware of the lack of any recycling in DC's public housing and our related efforts to ensure that public housing residents have access to these essential services. DCHA issued an RFP to provide recycling in selected public housing sites in December 2018, and it still hasn't been awarded. We don't understand the reason for this delay. We also understand that the current 5-year DCHA trash hauling contract is up for renewal. We've submitted testimony included below and what I've submitted online to the Committee on Housing, urging DCHA board to award the limited recycling contract quickly and to ensure that the RFP that DCHA is about to issue for trash hauling is expanded to include recycling for sites not covered by the recycling RFP contract award. We also want to take this opportunity to commend the Department of Public Works Office of Waste Diversion Program Manager John Johnson for reaching out to DCHA to discuss this issue. Recycling not only reduces waste, but it also diverts recyclable materials away from landfills and incinerators, which contaminate our air and contribute to climate change. All DC residents deserve access to recycling, and it's the only way we'll be able to meet the district's zero waste goals. Thank you, Chairperson Nadeau, for the opportunity to testify, and happy Earth Day.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Sorry, technical difficulties. We'll now hear from Joanna Blattner.
Good morning, Chairperson Nadeau and staff of the Committee on Public Works and Operations. My name is Joanna Blattner, and I am the Director of Government Affairs at DC Action. DC Action uses research, data, collective action, and racial equity lenses to break down barriers that stand in the way of all kids reaching their full potential. We also convene 4 coalitions composed predominantly of nonprofit direct service providers. We serve on the steering committee for the DC Coalition for Nonprofit Equity. I am testifying today on behalf of the steering committee of Coalition for Nonprofit Equity. The coalition believes that community-based nonprofit service providers are critical players in combating the effects of poverty on children, youth, and families, and are important partners to the district in fulfilling its obligation to its residents. We are grateful to the DC Council and the Mayor for passing the Nonprofit Fair Compensation Act of 2020. This was a critical step forward in recognizing the true costs that nonprofits take on when providing services for district residents through DC contracts and grants. However, while the law became effective in March 2021, 3 years later, it is still not being consistently or fully implemented. Due to lack of payment for true costs, nonprofits face a loss every time they accept a DC government contract or grant. Organizations are then left scrambling to fill the gaps with other sources of revenue, often private philanthropic grants that are not long-term. This is putting nonprofit service providers in perilous positions, with many being forced to consider cutting services, staffing, and more in order to partner with DC as a service provider. This is not only harming the district's nonprofit partners, but is also causing very real harm to the district's residents by putting critical services at risk. Years of not having true costs covered, flat funding, and increasing costs, all amidst increasing need for social services, have created an untenable situation for nonprofits, and this cannot continue. Action and funding is needed now to bolster the work of district nonprofits and the nonprofit workforce. The average nonprofit salary in DC is just $44,000, indicating that they are asset limited and income constrained. By contrast, to live comfortably in the Washington region, a single individual without children must earn at least $76,000 as of 2023, and to live within the district's boundaries can incur a much higher cost of living. In a recent study by the National Nonprofit Council, 45% of nonprofit employees reported that they were thinking of leaving their jobs because they simply cannot afford to stay. If we wait any longer to fund the nonprofit fair compensation law, the nonprofit workforce will be decimated and we will not be able to perform critical services that our community needs. With more than 1/5 of Black residents living below the official poverty measure and current violence unprecedented since the 90s, this is no time to cut the foundation of our community services. The district was a leader in passing the Nonprofit Fair Compensation Act, yet it is now failing to enact the law that it passed. If nonprofit service sector is to survive, keep and train talented staff, and continue to provide quality services that district residents deserve, the sector must be treated equitably and fairly. Paying the true operating costs on top of direct services, is the first step in that direction. We are requesting that the Office of Contracting and Procurement take the following actions to effectuate the full implementation of the law. Ensure that direct costs are being paid in addition to direct costs for all nonprofit contract agreements executed by OCP, and ensure regular and ongoing training for contract officers in OCP and across the district to improve full and consistent compliance with the law. The Office of Contracting and Procurement has been a leader in recent months in ensuring RFPs released include the language of the law. This is an important step forward, and taking the above actions will move OCP and the district closer to full implementation and eventual full funding of the law. This law supports the livelihood and the workforce of our DC nonprofit sector. It included in my written testimony are supplemental materials detailing the district's noncompliance with the law and the full risks associated. Thank you for the opportunity to share feedback from the Coalition for Nonprofit Equity, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for your testimony. We'll now hear from Jeremy Brzezowski.
Should we start again? Great. Will we reset the clock? Great. Good morning, Chairperson Nadeau, members of the committee, and everyone listening and watching here at home. I'm Jeremy Brzezowski, and for the last 14 years, I've been operating Agricity, a sustainability company based here in the nation's capital. We're experts in zero waste, especially composting programs, and we're a proud CBE. This is the third time I've testified before this committee since February, and it never gets old. Today is Earth Day. 7 years ago, this week, we signed our first contract with the District of Columbia, and I stood with Mayor Bowser, then Chairperson Che, and then DPW Director Chris Shorter at Eastern Market for the launch of the food waste drop-off program. In the 350 or so weekends that followed, my team and I greeted more than 650,000 people to our tents and diverted more than 4.4 million pounds of food scraps from landfills to compost. Then this January, the Office of Contracting and Procurement informed us that our services were no longer required. Back in February, at your DPW oversight hearing, I specifically asked you to keep an eye on our protest of this latest food waste drop-off program procurement. I was optimistic that justice and fairness might prevail. Today, despite a clear ruling in our favor by the Contract Appeals Board, I have no such optimism. After $25,000 in legal fees, we've come to believe that we are operating within a broken system, shouting into a void as we experience firsthand the incompetence, unpredictability, and unfairness of our existing procurement system. The paucity of people testifying this morning should fill you with alarm. How is it possible that an agency largely responsible for deploying a nearly $30 billion budget has only a handful of public witnesses? I suspect the reason there are precious few of us here today is that nobody who wants to do business with the city feels they can afford to raise their voice about a broken system that leads to bad outcomes and tremendous waste. For more than a decade, I've been appearing before this committee to advocate for composting and sustainability. I'm here today to implore you to use your oversight power to investigate the Office of Contracting and Procurement's behavior in this matter. And here are a few questions you might start with. How is it possible that the same person who was found by the Contract Appeals Board to have done an improper job running the procurement remain in charge of the process post-protest? How is it possible for us, as the successful protester, to get a fair shake in this environment? And why would the city's best interests be served by replacing a pioneering company with a decade of experience and track record of excellence with a company that the CAB determined was unqualified for lack of experience? The procurement process is irrational, and small businesses and community organizations bear the brunt of the uncertainty that it creates. Before kicking us to the curb, OCP kept my company on a series of short-term contracts, including month-to-month, for the better part of a year. We understand that DPW is now operating the food waste drop-off program on an emergency contract with the same company that the CAB explicitly told OCP to stop working with. Further, OCP has now withdrawn the original procurement, deeming our original bid non-responsive for technical reasons, including that we did not show evidence of our ability to perform. This after 7 years of successfully performing the work for the same agency doing the procurement. It's bonkers. Instead of having a procurement process that rewards good work and enables the pursuit of ambitious goals for the city, we have a broken Byzantine system that creates a race to the bottom on price, no matter the cost to the environment or the community. Perversely, the city counts on this. The procurement process is so opaque, the expense involved in protesting it so high, and the potential threat of harming one's chances in future procurement so severe that OCP can know with certainty that protests will be few and far between and virtually unheard of for contracts as small as ours, which one senior DPW official described to me as budget dust. The cliche, "you can't fight City Hall," is a cliche for a reason. I know this isn't the DPW budget hearing, but it's worth noting that the mayor requested a $185 million budget for the agency this year, with less than $4 million allocated for next year on all of its organics recycling initiatives, despite the fact that the material itself represents somewhere between 1/3 and 40% of the waste stream. In a rational universe, we as subject matter experts already under contract to DPW would have been in a position to serve our city and help it pursue its stated goals. Instead, the Office of Contracting and Procurement appears to be driving the train and holding everyone back. We need meaningful changes to the procurement process in this city, fast, and this committee needs to take the lead. I'll be submitting my written testimony, which includes these remarks, as well as a timeline of the slow-moving train wreck of a procurement, as well as exhibits that underscore the city's cavalcade of failures in support of one of its signature environmental programs of the past decade. I hope providing some visibility into this process will raise questions for everyone, including this committee, on how we pursue contracting in the District of Columbia and what that means for our future as a city. Happy Earth Day, and of course, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you all very much for your testimony. For Ms. Plume, considering the importance of recycling as a basic waste diversion practice, how do you envision integrating recycling services into broader zero waste initiatives in DC, particularly for underserved communities like those in public housing?
To me, it would make sense to put it under DPW, under the Department of Public Works. Right now, you know, it's so confusing because public schools recycling there is under what Department of General Services, whereas apparently it's the Department of Housing who oversees recycling in public housing. You know, we cannot all be experts in everything, and DPW is doing a better job at recycling. We have a long way to go, but it does make sense to consolidate those services under one agency. And that's what makes sense to me.
You mentioned in your testimony you were not able to find information about DCHA contract awards. Is that common? I mean, have you had trouble finding other documents in the portal?
I have to say that it was my colleague Susan Shore who spent over a day, about a day, trying to figure out who is responsible for those contracts and where they are, having to go into the public record. And again, she found this this RFP that was issued in 2019, and then it kind of fell apart from there. She was able to talk to someone in Councilmember Robert White's office who talked through it a bit more and explained that that RFP has yet to be awarded. You just wonder, you know, what happened? Why not? You know, it's kind of a quagmire, frankly, to figure this stuff out. And it's inside baseball that is very difficult for the average citizen to go figure out. And it should be more transparent.
Thank you. Ms. Blattner. Thanks for all of the work you're doing. I appreciate the opportunity to work together with the coalition on these issues. Given OCP's history with the Nonprofit Act, do you think funding an additional study and RFP for the legislation would prove successful?
I would like to think so. I do believe that the Executive Office of Grants in the Executive Office of the City Administrator, I believe, has conducted a survey to get some additional data on the cost of fully funding this law. So hopefully between the survey and a new study, we can get some really clear, unbiased information about the true cost of implementation. But given that they did not actually utilize the funding last time, there is some concern about the efficacy of funding another study.
Regarding the survey that you mentioned that the city administrator's office conducted, has the coalition been privy to the information within the survey, and was the coalition an active partner in the process?
Thank you for the question. The coalition was not an active partner in the process of developing the survey questions. We did see the questions after the survey was sent out to district agencies, and we have not seen any of the results, though we are told that all the agencies have finished submitting their information for the survey. There were some questions in the survey that were particularly concerning about how the district is truly understanding what it means to comply with the law, particularly related to reduction in service levels. So, for example, someone providing services to our homeless population would have to, reduce the level of services and the number of individuals they may serve in order to absorb the cost of operating indirect expenses on top of those direct services. And that is not our understanding of how indirect costs are supposed to operate. Rather than supplanting direct services, we want them to supplement the rates.
Is there a larger role that the coalition should be playing in the implementation of the act, such as joining in the trainings with OCP?
That would be lovely. We were able to take part in one of the trainings that the Office of Grant Management conducted, but I do think training beyond that would be incredibly helpful with district agencies in terms of our understanding of the law, working with nonprofits and the kind of uniquenesses that nonprofits face compared to for-profit service providers. So working with both contract officers and grant officers on training materials, as well as creating some of the plain language that can be more accessible for nonprofits to really understand their rights, to be able to request their NICRA and their indirect cost rates, as well as just making sure that they are, again, getting supplementary funding, not supplanting.
In your opinion, what are the potential consequences if the Nonprofit Fair Compensation Act continues to be underfunded and inconsistently implemented? And how would that impact the nonprofit workforce and services provided to district residents?
Sure. So as my testimony stated, we know nonprofit rates for compensation are incredibly low compared to what it costs to actually live in the district and live, in community with the people that nonprofits serve. It is simply an unrealistic expectation that individuals in the nonprofit sector that are paid so low would stay in their jobs, would be able to maintain important relationships with vulnerable populations, and really build their own skill sets and hone their craft. Consistent turnover in any job sector can cause tremendous a cost to businesses in terms of disrupting the workforce, having to go through training again, rebuilding relationships. All of that, again, is harmful to district residents who are really reliant on services. And if we don't address the rate of paying service providers fairly, including their costs, not just per like the staff who are working with community members, but the staff who are making sure that our grants and contracts are fully in compliance and our reports are in compliance with the law. All of that is critical for maintaining high quality services in the district, and we cannot afford to have our workforce hollowed out for such critical services.
Thank you very much. Mr. Brzezowski, what level of communication did you receive from OCP about issues with your application prior to the ruling?
Can you be more specific?
You indicated that you were just let know that your application was not qualified. So did you get any information about that before that decision was made?
No.
Okay. And generally speaking, when you compete for these contracts, is there a back and forth at all about, like, say something is missing?
Not in this case, at least not with us.
Has
Our
that-
understanding is that, it's not my place to determine what goes on inside the Office of Contracting and Procurement. All I can say is that the communication with us has been unsatisfactory and hard to follow.
Could you compare it to how you've done work in other jurisdictions?
Sure. It's much worse in every possible way.
Anything about the process in another place that we could learn from?
Again, I don't hold myself out as a procurement expert. I'm a small business person trying to operate and do good in the community, being held back by a bureaucracy that seems profoundly broken and in which we have found there to be zero accountability. The situation in which we find ourselves is very challenging to understand and navigate, and we seem to have no recourse. The reason I'm sitting here before this committee for the third time in the last 2.5 months is because every action we've tried to take outside of this committee has been met with a stone wall of silence. We're stuck.
Yeah.
We're stuck. And even after the Contract Appeals Board came down with a very clear ruling in our favor, OCP found a very quick and easy workaround to skip the spirit of what the CAB was telling them to do and just kick us to the curb again. So we're in a situation now where the latest state of affairs, as we understand it, is that the Contract Appeals Board ruled in our favor. OCP came back and determined our bid on the contract, which goes back to last August, was unsatisfactory for 2 reasons. One is they said we were missing 2 years of bid data. We believe that is entirely due to the antiquated systems at OCP and not to the fact that we didn't submit them. The second thing that they suggested is that we didn't properly document our experience to prove that we had met the special requirements of this contract, which we have no idea if is true or not true because they didn't give us any specifics as to what the failure to comply might have been. But regardless of what paperwork might or might not have been submitted, there is no question that the idea that we may or may not be qualified to perform after performing every single week for 7 years, the idea that that is somehow the reason for dismissing our bid seems farcical.
Yeah. Have you had a similar experience in the past with other contracts here in the district?
We have been working for a very long time to keep our challenges with the Office of Contracting and Procurement quiet and private because we want to continue working with the city, and there is very little sense in starting a fight and picking a fight with someone much bigger and with much deeper pockets. And for better or worse, we were probably right. You know, at this point, our company vis-a-vis OCP has nothing to lose. There's nothing they can take away from us. We've fired all the people we had to fire. We've lost the program that we built from scratch. And we have been put in a position where we have become a kind of keystone example in my mind of how impossible it is in this city to do good work without being held back. It's just so disheartening. As someone who lives in the city, works in the city, has started 3 businesses in the city, raised kids in this city, sent my kids to public schools in this city, fully invested in this city, we have found it impossible for the city to invest back. I don't know how else to put it. It is profound. We are stuck in a profoundly unfair system. We are in the maw of a giant bureaucracy with no accountability to speak of. The fact that the same individual who was found by the CAB to have behaved improperly in lots of ways, not just the ways we protested. We could only afford to protest so much. You know, the CAB, if you read the footnotes of the ruling, and I encourage you to do so if you haven't, they pulled out lots of other irregularities and improprieties in this procurement process that we didn't actually protest because we couldn't afford it. Because every time you bring up another thing, it's another $6,000 or $8,000 to the lawyers. The city is counting on this. I am 100% convinced that if you were to go and investigate a large swath of the city's small and mid-sized contracts, you would find some version of this along the way. And the reason is because there's no accountability. There's no one else to talk to. There's no one to bring it up to. And even when you win a protest, you don't win. I don't know how else to put it. I wish I could tell you that this was that there was an easy fix here that you could snap your fingers and make change. I don't think that's the case. I think OCP is profoundly broken from a structural perspective. I think it doesn't take community into account sufficiently. I think it doesn't take the environment into account sufficiently. And I think that it is hamstringing small businesses and professional do-gooders, whether they be for-profit or not-for-profit, and creating an environment where the city is stuck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to everybody on the panel. We'll now be joined by Acting Director of the Office of Contracting and Procurement, Nancy Haitman. Director Haitman, I'm gonna administer an oath to you, so if you could raise your right hand. Do you swear? Oh, we'll get everybody lined up, sorry. Okay, great. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury the testimony you are about to give to the Committee on Public Works and Operations is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
I do.
Great. When you're ready, you may begin your testimony.
Good morning, Chairperson Nadeau and the Committee on Public Works and Operations. I am Nancy Haitman, Acting Chief Procurement Officer of the District of Columbia. I am joined by Mark Scott, Chief Operating Officer of the Office of Contracting and Procurement, and Alex Awas from the Office of the Chief Financial Officer. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss the Office of Contracting and Procurement's fiscal year 25 budget. Mayor Bowser's fiscal year 25 Fair Shot budget is a reflection of our DC values and priorities. It is a budget that maintains a focus on key priorities such as public safety, education, housing and economic development, and transportation and the environment. This budget is the product of difficult choices that balance the need for strategic investments with fiscal responsibility in the face of a challenging budget reality. The mayor's budget proposal is guided by the principles of maintaining and enhancing core services, prioritizing successful programs that advance equity, resetting spending to align with resources, and focusing new spending on public safety, education, and the revitalization of downtown. These principles are reflected in OCP's proposed fiscal year 25 budget. OCP's proposed fiscal year 25 budget is $30 million, an increase of $442,000 or 1.5% over the fiscal year 24 approved budget. This increase is driven by a $542,000 increase in special purpose SPR funds, offset by a $100,000 decrease in local funds. The $542,000 increase in SPR funds will support 4 new FTEs in our surplus property division. These additional staff are critical to addressing the projected increase in activity within this division, which generates revenue for the district through the sale of surplus property. By investing in our surplus property division, we aim to maximize the reutilization of surplus property and increase revenue for the district, contributing to the mayor's goal of aligning spending with resources for long-term fiscal stability. The $100,000 decrease in local funds is primarily due to cost savings in personal services, specifically in fringe benefits, which have decreased from 22.8% in fiscal year 24 to 21.9% in fiscal year 25. This reduction, along with minor decreases in agency supplies and IT equipment, allows us to maintain our current level of service while realizing savings for the district. Regarding our capital budget, we did not receive new funding for the past cloud modernization project. As a result, this project is on a strategic pause, and OCP will shift our focus to improving the past on-premises system and exploring other operational and technology improvements. We remain committed to modernizing our procurement processes and will continue to work within our existing resources to achieve this goal. OCP has identified several key initiatives that we will prioritize in fiscal year 25 to improve our procurement processes and better serve our client agencies and vendors. These include updating the DC supply schedule application, increasing training offerings for our staff and other district staff, strengthening our implementation of the environmental preferable purchasing standards in partnership with DOEE, updating our procurement practices manual and policy and procedures library, improving data accessibility and reporting capabilities, and streamlining our procurement processes through improved job aids, standard templates, and more granular training. Our initiatives, combined with ongoing efforts to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion, expand disaster and resilience planning, enhance customer experience, and maximize the reutilization of surplus property, align with the mayor's goals of prioritizing successful programs that advance equity and support economic development. By streamlining procurement processes, enhancing transparency, and supporting small and local businesses, we are contributing to the revitalization of our local economy, the vibrance of downtown, and building a more efficient, effective, and transparent procurement function that serves the needs of the district and its residents. In closing, I want to emphasize that the investments and initiatives outlined in our fiscal year 25 budget are critical to achieving our mission of procuring quality goods and services through a streamlined procurement process that is transparent, responsive, and accountable. We are committed to working with the mayor, the council, our agency partners, and our staff to build a best-in-class procurement system that supports the district goals and priorities. The mayor's fiscal year 25 budget is a reflection of the difficult choices we must make in the face of unprecedented challenges. It is a budget that prioritizes our shared DC values, maintains core services, advances equity, and makes strategic investments in our collective future. At OCP, we are proud to do our part in supporting these priorities. I am happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, and I'm sorry to not be able to be there with you in person today. A couple of framing questions that we ask all of our agencies from the Council's Office of Racial Equity. In your proposed FY25 budget, are there specific programs or allocations that are specifically designed to address racial or economic inequities faced by district residents?
There are not specific programs or allocations in the budget.
In your FY25 budget, well, I guess you don't really have any reductions except for capital, huh? So we can skip that one.
Correct.
How much of the agency's data is collected or disaggregated by race?
OCP's Human Resources Department collects data by race, and the Procurement Automated Support System data is not collected by race.
Okay. Are there performance or operational data points that could be collected by race that currently aren't?
We don't have that right now as a field where we determine the race of our vendors because our program, we've not had a race-based procurement program. So for our contracts, we do not have that as a data field at this time.
As part of the next budget season, how could community members, especially communities of color and low-income communities, be engaged or consulted to identify programming or service needs for your department?
For us, I think outreach to the vendor community, we are very focused on, in particular, our certified business enterprise community here in DC. And we are working on a lot of outreach to that community to get feedback from them on business opportunities that are available to them and just on how to engage those businesses. We believe that there is a fair amount of overlap between our certified business enterprise community and those communities that are based on persons of color or race or other factors that we are not currently capturing in our data. So we do value our outreach to the certified business enterprise community. And we are working on communications to the vendor community and public events so that we may engage and have feedback from them.
Thank you. All right, so getting into capital, the past modernization project funding ends this year, bringing your capital budget down to zero. Well, I guess 0% change, so flat. Is the program fully implemented and ready to launch?
The program is not ready to launch. We were going to do the launch in October of this calendar year. Because of the strategic pause that the past modernization has been placed on, we are not able to do that. We do have, there has been progress made. We do have baseline configurations for the past cloud that have been completed. We've done functional user testing, although without integrations, to confirm the baseline configurations meet the district's requirements. There are a few adjustments that need to be made there. And we had started, but we have not finalized the training materials for that system and the integration with other systems such as diffs. While we are on this strategic pause, we are looking at other opportunities that we can have to try to accomplish some of the same things. We won't be able to capture all the benefits that we would have gotten from the past cloud system, but we are trying to do what we can to continue moving forward. In the meantime, we are continuing our engagement with this Office of the Chief Financial Officer on some PAS and diffs integrations and various other aspects of the process. So that is where we are at the moment.
Can you provide an update, please, on the amount spent on the past capital project in FY24 year to date and when any remaining funds will be used?
Okay, so far we have obligated $3.8 million of the funding, about $500,000 of which has been spent this fiscal year. We are anticipating receiving some additional invoices, so that number would change. We do anticipate using all of that funding by the end of this fiscal year because we are engaged in activities with the CFO's office. Still, we are engaged in ensuring that as the project is on a strategic pause, we have not left loose ends and we've wrapped up what we can wrap up.
For the public, could you please describe the purpose behind the PASS project and its importance?
Oh, sure. The PASS project, as PASS stands for Procurement Automated Support System. Currently, the district has an on-premise system that has been used by the Office of Contracting and Procurement since 2003. The PASS Cloud project is, well, it was going to the cloud. So we were moving from an on-premise system to the cloud. And in that, it would give us additional functionality that we currently do not have available in the on-premise system. Some of it had an impact on the other user agencies in the district where they could get more up-to-date and current information on the status of their procurements. Some of it would benefit the vendor community in that they, first of all, they would have access through mobile devices, which currently we do not have access to, which means they could be anywhere and looking at whatever is in the PASS system. And we then also just internally, it would have, it would facilitate the reporting requirements. So those were some of the benefits that we were looking for from the PASS cloud system.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. I mean, I'm concerned because we've put so much money and time into the project, which is now behind schedule and on pause. Why was the project why wasn't it possible to complete the project with the allotted funding and within the required time frame?
Well, over the time of the project, we've had two events that have affected the timeline. First one being COVID. When we had COVID, the project was put on a delay of 1 year. And then also, prior fiscal year, the project was put on another 1-year delay because the DIF system had launched the CFO's financial system. And there was a concern about having two major systems launching at the same time. So then we did delay the past project another year. So we were working and we were on target for the October 1, 2024 date, but budget circumstances and I think still some concerns about a few issues to work out in diffs led to the decision to postpone it again.
Why was there a concern about the two systems launching at the same time?
Just because they're two major systems. One was the financial system for the district. The other was the fact that the procurement system impacts all the businesses, all the ability to get the services. And I think the concern really is that any system, when it launches, there's always some things that people need to get familiar with a new system. There may be a few things that have to be worked out, and to just have it done at two systems at one time was just a lot.
How did it happen that diffs was being launched at the same time you meant to launch PASS?
Well, our past schedule was originally earlier.
1 year earlier.
Yeah.
Do you think that you would have been able to proceed with the PASS launch if diffs had not been such a terrible rollout?
Well, I guess I feel uncomfortable categorizing it as a terrible rollout. So, but
There were
would
challenges with the rollout, and
Yeah.
Octo had not been brought in early enough, and there were a lot of problems. And so you don't have to accept the word terrible, but those other things are facts. So
Yes, there were some rollout issues, and so I think that I'm sorry. I got sidetracked on that. What was
no,
your
it's okay.
question?
So if that had been smoother, do you think you would have been able to stay on track, or was it the way in which this was rolled out that made you pause?
I think we could have stayed on track had we not needed to have that delay.
Now, part of the reason for the pause is the budget constraints that the entire city's having.
Yes.
And then how much money would you have needed to stay on track and not take a strategic pause?
Well, we would have needed approximately $6 million in fiscal year.
Capital funds.
Mhm.
For 24 or 25?
That would be we needed funds in 24. I'm sorry, I should have been more specific. We needed
Yeah.
additional funds in 24 because of the way the project was being funded through the budget. And then we would have needed additional funds in fiscal year 25.
So how long is the strategic pause for?
I would have to, I do not know at this time.
Okay, so there's a budget gap in 24 and 25. What about the out years?
The out
Or is that
years-
just how much is needed for the completion of the project at this point?
No, that was how much was needed for go live in October of 24. And then for the support in the start of fiscal year 25. After
Okay.
that, each year there are licensing costs. And I might want to get back to you on the specific cost of the licenses. But after that, the cost would be a little bit for staff to do some configuration, not coding, and then the licenses each year.
Okay. So if you could put a percentage on how much is complete, could you do that?
I think I would put it about 85%, 80 to 85%. We have
And
not done the integrations with the other systems such as DIP. That's where we have ended, but we've done internally the functional acceptance testing, and then the next steps would depend on the integration with other systems.
Are there capacity issues beyond the capital funding?
Could you clarify for me?
If I were a magician and was able to give you
Oh,
$6 million, could you implement that, or would there be other challenges?
Well, at this point, because we've already started the pause on past that, I think that implementation for the October 1 date is no longer feasible. It would have to be.
Of course,
After
but you don't even know when you're restarting from this pause.
at this time, I do not have a date.
So is there staff that is already working on this and will continue through the pause, or is that staff no longer available?
We will be, we had been having a combination of internal staff and some contractor support. So the contractor support will not be needed in terms of from the software developer provider itself. We had assigned some procurement staff to the team. So a couple of those people will be reassigned back to the procurement function. And then the rest of the remaining contractors and the rest of the technical team will remain trying to work on other IT projects to move the agency forward in the meantime.
Thank you for that. What are the sources of OCP's special purpose revenue funds?
Surplus property sales.
Great. In SPR, the proposed budget includes a net increase of $541,811 and 4 FTEs across multiple divisions, primarily to fund the Business Resources and Support Services Division due to an anticipated increase in the operations of the surplus property program. Why do you anticipate an increase in operations of the surplus property program?
The surplus property program is always looking to expand, and the person who is the head of our surplus property program does an excellent job of outreach to other agencies. And so most recently, he re-engaged with the Office of Tax and Revenue, and we will be working with them as they seize property mainly from businesses that have not paid their sales tax. We will be selling that property through our surplus property division. We also are working more closely with DC Water and DC Housing to sell some of their equipment, and the United Medical Center, which is officially the DC not-for-profit hospital, during their close down, we will be working with them to go in, inventory the property, determine it, and determine how to dispose of that as well. So he also, in addition to reaching out to other agencies, he also has this vision where he's looking for having the 4 additional people broken up along with existing staff to support each deputy mayor's cluster. So that would be the public safety, human services, government operations and infrastructure. And so the idea is to track the property more when it comes into the district, track its lifespan. And as things are getting near the end of their life cycle, working to make sure that if the agency is going to dispose of the property, that we're aware of that, and that there's a new procurement if they need to replace it. And if they're not, and then what they're disposing of, we will go ahead and do a more concerted and engaged effort to sell the property. And so it's really just, I think, increasing the emphasis on accountability in the property from the time the district receives it till it's disposed of.
Okay, thank you. And then what are the role and the duties of the 4 proposed FTEs?
Okay, well, I think I just went into
Well,
that with the
yeah.
portfolio, with the portfolios, and then each of them will be responsible for and conduct analysis for capitalized assets, equipment acquisition plans, equipment purchases, and property disposal actions per cluster. They will also work with the independent agencies on
Great.
their equipment purchases and record tracking.
Great. Thank you so much. In the budget book, it says there are 35 FTEs budgeted in other agencies but employed by OCP. Is this the same number of FTEs as the FY24 approved budget?
No, that was the number in 24 budget was 23.
Okay. And what is the need for the additional FTEs?
Well, 4 of the additional FTEs listed, the ones for DDS are not really additional. They were left out of the budget book last year. So
Hmm.
that 4 is not an increase. That's a status quo for that agency. The additional, the other agencies that have additional ones are DC Health and DOEE, DDOT, Office of Neighborhood Safety Engagement, DBH, and DFS. And with the emphasis on public safety, it definitely the ONE's office and DFS have the increase. And then the other agencies have had some increases in workload. So they just reflect the desire of the agency to have a dedicated resource for them. Or in
Okay.
some cases, an additional dedicated resource.
And how many vacancies does OCP have currently?
OCP currently has 33 vacancies. 19 are in active recruitment, 11 are on hold for vacancy savings, and 3 just are newly separated employees. So we haven't accounted for them in the other 2 categories yet.
It appears that the agency consistently has vacancies across offices. Can you explain those?
Most of the vacancies are in the contract specialist position. That's probably within OCP, the largest category of staff that we have to begin with. And there's just a lot of movement in that area. There's a lot of opportunities in this region for contract specialists. They can go to the federal government, private sector, or they can go to other jurisdictions. So there's a lot of opportunity for them to find other jobs.
During performance oversight, we discussed the salary is an important tool to retain staff in our government and at OCP. It seems like there's no increase in salary for OCP employees in the FY25 budget. Is that accurate? And is that sustainable for your agency to retain and recruit?
Yeah, we do believe salary is important, and the way we manage and have historically managed salary increases has been through the vacancy savings that we have. It's not a separately itemized item in the budget. But we do use those monies to increase salaries, and we also have used those to give performance incentives or bonuses in prior years as well.
During performance oversight, we discussed reports of documents missing from OCP's transparency portal, and we heard more about that issue in public testimony today. As of today, is the portal up to date?
Well, I'm going to say it's probably as up to date as possible. Under these circumstances, documents are always being processed. I would say that we are at about the 90% level of all our contracts that should be posted are posted. And we are also, is one of the things we're going to work on in the meantime while we're on this strategic pause, is if there's things we can do to the transparency portal process that would make it easier for people to comply with. It's right now, it's got several manual steps to it. And I think anytime you have manual steps, you have more opportunities for things to get missed. So we're going to see what we can do to do that. We emphasize it within the agencies. We emphasize it every week. We have our performance data team provide a report to the Deputy Chief Procurement Officer and the Chief Contracting Officers on the percentage compliance and also a list of those contracts that we think should be on the portal and are not, and for them to determine whether there's any problems with them or whether they just need to go ahead and post the materials.
How do you arrive at that 90% number?
Our system data and performance team does it through looking at what we call the CW number, the contract number in the system. And if it shows that it's been awarded, then we look at that and then compare that against the portal.
typical amount of time it takes for documents to be uploaded to the portal?
We haven't measured that time, but the expectation is that as the contract is awarded, that it gets, starts the process. There is a small review process that we go through. We have our legal team look at any contracts that we are anticipating posting to try to determine whether any parts of it are confidential or proprietary and should be redacted. And after that, there is another part of the process that involves Octo where they are actually uploading the documents to the portal.
Oh, interesting. So Octo does the upload?
Well, there's a connection between the data set that they have and how it gets actually loaded onto the portal, just
So
because of
there's,
the way pass works.
oh, I see. Interesting. So your team isn't the one that pushes the button that actually puts it in the portal?
No, Octo has to do something to get it on the portal. Mhm.
All
But
right.
I'm not saying for anything that's not posted, I'm not saying that Octo is responsible for that because they only get the information that we give them.
No, I did not
Okay.
take that away from what you were saying. Yeah,
It's
will
not
be good to
like,
get you your new system.
yeah, the pass on premise system is not as automatic as some people would like it to be.
Yeah. And to bring the portal up to date, that's all part of the pass.
Well, when we were doing the Pass Cloud project, it was going to
Yeah.
be done more automatically with the contracts being actually drafted in the system. And then
Right.
when it was
Right.
awarded, it would go. Right now, the contracts generally are not drafted in the system. They're drafted outside of the system and then uploaded into it. So it was going to cut out at least one of the manual steps.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Is there a separate capital expense for upgrades to the portal itself?
We haven't identified at this point, but we're still in the process of just coming up with our final plan for the fiscal year and what we're going to do with our team. There will be some capital expenses involved in some of the things that we have to do.
Okay. In your pre-hearing responses, you indicated that OCP's Office of Procurement Integrity and Compliance conducts random internal audits or reviews of the transparency portal for quality control. How frequently do these audits occur?
They conduct them 2 times a quarter.
Can you provide the committee with a list of dates when these audits were performed and the findings for FY 23 and 24?
Yes, we can.
Great. In 2021, we passed legislation requiring the district to reduce greenhouse gas emissions associated with its food procurement by 25% by the year 2030. This legislation was fully funded in FY 22, including 2 FTEs. Has OCP filled the 2 FTE positions for this legislation?
We have not. As I mentioned at the performance hearing, we have the one person who is doing, I think we identified about 1/3 of time. On the other one, we have currently posted that position and we are recruiting for that position. So we are in active recruitment for that other position.
And what steps has OCP taken to implement the requirements of this legislation?
Well, we have, since the last few months, we've been much more engaged with DOEE. We have posted on our website the 18 categories of specifications that are deemed sustainable specifications. And, oh, I'm sorry, I probably am talking both on EPPS and greenhouse gas at the same time.
That's okay.
Okay, and so in terms of the greenhouse gas emissions, we've provided information on our food and beverage contracts along with the underlying data so that DOEE can see what agencies are purchasing food and what types of food and beverage items are being purchased. And then DOEE has started working with those agencies in developing specifications or helping them develop specifications for their programs that would be more friendly, I guess, to reducing greenhouse gas emissions.
So in your pre-hearing responses, you indicated that OCP has not been funded in FY25 for the EPS program. Could you expand on that?
Mark Scott, the Chief Operating Officer, will address that.
Hi, Chairperson. So
Aye.
actually, in our funding source, we were actually funded for the Green Food Purchasing Amendment Act of 2021. What we have done in our sustainability program is we've used, I won't continue to say 1/3 of the person, but we've used the program analyst for EPPS. And we've also had myself as Chief Operating Officer, our Chief Performance Officer, and the program analyst pretty much laser focused with the DOES, EPPS team on moving any of the actions associated with EPPS forward. So in the current umbrella, we've kind of had the sustainability program under the operations division, working with DOEE on both programs.
Okay. Pre-hearing responses noted that you plan to train staff on EPS and make improvements to the PASS system. Can you explain in further detail what type of training you'll offer to staff and the timeline by which it'll be developed and rolled out?
Yes, so we are focusing our contracting staff on the specific commodity codes needed for EPS. The one thing that we clearly heard was when we initially articulated our spend, it was very low. And that's because we didn't have proper training on what to select on the PASS on-premise system. So now we are rolling out that as well as internal and external campaigns alongside DOEE on those particular areas that received updated specifications. So that's kind of been a real big deal for our agency, and we plan on rolling that out or continuing to roll that. We've started in Q2, and we're trying to kind of finalize our actions here in Q3.
Okay. We heard testimony recommending the creation of an Office of Sustainable Procurement at OCP to oversee EPS and green food purchasing programs. Would establishing a dedicated office provide continuity and assist in achieving the goals set out by the programs?
I don't believe that a dedicated office is necessary. I think just having the function there as an established function within the agency would accomplish that same purpose. We have dedicated the chief, he's not dedicated 100%, but the chief operating officer is very much engaged in the coordination of that program now. And he and the other program analysts meet on a weekly basis with DOEE. And so I think now that it has our attention again, I think we are able to create it as an ongoing and viable program and part of OCP.
Thank you. For the period FY20 to 23, what percentage of contracts exceeding $1 million were sole source solicitations?
5.1%.
For the period FY20 to 23, what percentage of contracts with option years were sole source solicitations?
About 3.6%.
I see a notable increase of $200,000 in IT hardware acquisitions and a $214,000 decrease in IT software acquisitions. What's the rationale behind this shift?
The shift just reflects where more of our IT money has been going and where it needs to go. We have, with everyone having their laptops and monitors and things, we do an equipment refresh every year. And so we just need to switch the emphasis in the budgeting from software to equipment.
Okay. Moving into some questions from our public witnesses. We heard testimony about the farmer's market food waste drop-off contract. What is the current status of this contract?
The current status, let me go back to the contract that was in effect that the Contract Appeals Board issued its decision on. That contract has been terminated. There is a 62-day emergency contract in effect that will run until May 28th. During that time, OCP is issuing a new solicitation, which we anticipate issuing that solicitation at the beginning of May. And then that would be open for people to respond to for approximately 14 or at least 14 days. And then we would anticipate making an award under that solicitation in June.
Okay, so the 62-day contract is with District Logistics?
It is.
Okay. And what were the levels of review of this decision? And how did nobody catch that District Logistics did not meet the special requirements in the solicitation?
I don't have any insight other than it was an oversight on the part of the person doing the procurement. That team was short-staffed at the time. And with having, I believe it was 4 vacancies in that unit at the time, that was almost half the unit had vacancies. So that was an oversight.
Is the number of vacancies, is that the reason that the contract kept getting extended on it as well? The prior contract?
And workload. Yeah, at that point, there were some of the vacancies. There were not, I'm not sure when they all started, but there were some vacancies. There had been some turnover in that starting probably in 2023. There had been some turnover in that unit and then some vacancies.
Because the responses to that contract were originally in August, is that right?
I believe that sounds right. Yeah.
Okay. And then would it normally take until December, January to go through that contracting process, or was that unusual?
I would not consider that a normal time frame for the dollar value of this procurement.
So it was longer than
It was
normal.
longer than what I would consider normal.
And what's the when something like this happens, when a contract is protested through CAB, and the protest is upheld, what are the steps that the agency takes with the staff who worked on that contract?
Well, the staff, there can be several steps. I mean, depending on what the actual nature of the problem is. In the case of this, we are we have recruited to add to the staff, which was a significant factor. So we have one person who's starting today, and then we have remaining people starting in 2 weeks, and then that should pretty much take it up to full staff again in that team. So that's certainly one thing we're doing. And then we have increased the oversight of that division with the Deputy Chief Procurement Officer is definitely engaged. We had already also placed a grade 16 Chief Contracting Officer directly in the procurement unit that supports DPW. And we are also going to work on some enhanced training.
Type of contract that this is, I'm sorry, the type of solicitation has a specific name. Can you remind me what that is?
Yeah, it's an invitation for bids, which also we've referred to as an IFB.
IFB. And that's pretty basic and streamlined, right? There's only a couple elements to it.
The elements are the IFB not generally, you make award on the basis of the lowest bid price. And the bid has to be what we call responsive. In other words, they have to agree that they're going to provide to us what we've asked for. And then there's the responsibility determination as well, in which the capability of the bidder to perform is looked at. And so if you have a low bid
Mm.
that the bidder is found responsive and responsible, then they can receive the award.
And this one also had some specifications by the agency, right? That had to
It
be met.
had, I think you're referring to the special standards of responsibility. We
Mhm.
have general standards that are in the statute, such as their financial capability. Are they, do they have a history of overcharging the district? Are they compliant with their taxes? What equipment are they going to use? In this case, it had two special standards of responsibility in which the vendor had to show a number of years of experience with certain aspects of the, I guess, composting or food waste industry.
And the contract that originally was awarded, the bidder did not meet those standards.
They did not meet them, no.
Okay, so I mean, we're talking about a pretty big oversight because there aren't that many things to review in this type of bid, right?
There aren't that, well, in the end, but the bid itself is a rather lengthy document. And I think if you, don't go back and refresh your memory completely on some of these things. It can be overlooked, but they are part of the responsibility determination.
Mhm. Okay, and then is the contracting officer who worked on this still employed with the agency?
Yes,
Okay, and on the same team?
yes.
Um,
Again, I want to emphasize that I had added the grade 16 person to that team, and also the deputy chief procurement officer is very much involved in this particular procurement and ensuring that it's done appropriately and on time.
did the contracting officer who initially issued the contract to the district logistics then re-review the remaining solicitation after contract appeals board issued the decision directing OCP to cancel the existing contract and re-review the remaining solicitation?
Yeah, that solicitation is being reviewed again before it's issued
By the same person?
by the same person and by the deputy chief procurement officer and the grade 16.
Do you feel like there is any sort of conflict of interest for the same procurement officer to review after? Could there be some bias after sort of being rebuked by the contract appeals board?
I think that we don't take these things personally. It's business with the contract appeals board, but I think if anything, the decision has made the contracting staff, including all the ones I mentioned, more attentive to all of the details of the process. So I think that with the involvement of the additional people, I think that this is fine.
Okay. For the contract that was in place before for the market, was there another option year or was it the end?
I don't think there was another option year.
Okay. Thank you. Your agency indicated you were unable to award a new recycling services contract before the current contract became retroactive due to a number of emergency procurements. Can you please explain why these occurrences would affect OCP's ability to get out an RFP?
The RFP was issued
Okay.
in 2021, I believe.
Is there a new contract though for this fiscal year?
We are getting ready to send, it's going through its final stages of review, but we have a package that we anticipate will arrive at the council in May
For the recycling contract?
for the recycling contract, correct?
Okay. But this was delayed due to a number of emergency procurements, is that right?
Yeah, there were a number of things going on for that team during that time. Both the then chief contracting officer and then the contracting officer were involved in emergency procurements. It was started during the COVID era. And then we had other things such as the People's Convoy, where we had to support that. And then the tipping floor at Benning Road had to be replaced. And then there was the fire after the after the floor had been replaced. So there were a number of unanticipated procurements that had to
Got
be
it.
addressed.
And that was all on the same team.
That was the same team. Mhm.
Do you have the ability to flex between teams when things like that happen?
We do. I would say when all that started back in 2021, we were pretty taxed already because we had many of our teams supporting the public health emergency as well. So we had between obtaining the PPE and supporting the health aspects of it, we had people at full capacity already.
For the recycling services contract again, what efforts were made to explore alternative vendors?
For recycling?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was issued, it was explored, I mean, not explored, it was published and not advertised. That's the word I'm trying to think of. It was advertised in public means of paper and on our website. And so we were seeking vendors through that way.
Thank you. Okay, for the Nonprofit Fairness Act, in your responses, you stated that OCP is unable to track metrics related to the number of nonprofits that OCP contracts with or the amount of funds that OCP spends on these contracts in past. Is that a feature being added once PASS is updated?
I think that there's two features that we're going to explore, whether we can add them to the on-premises system. And one would be race, and since we had those questions before, one would be race and one would be the nonprofit status.
Okay. Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
And this will conclude today's budget oversight hearing. If you have not yet submitted written testimony, please do so by submitting it on the council's hearing management system. The record for this hearing will close at 5:30 on May 5th, 2024. I'd like to take a moment to remind everyone that the Committee on Public Works and Operations will be holding a number of additional budget oversight hearings over the coming weeks. Please visit the council hearing management system for committee's budget oversight hearing schedule and to sign up to testify if you would like to do so. The time is now 10:38 a.m. and this hearing is adjourned. Thank you.